are going to be talking about the topic of rest this morning. And one of the verses we're going to be looking at for those who have a Bible is Matthew 11:28 to 30. So it's a genuine pleasure to be able to stand up here this morning and speak to you. I prayed this morning that they would not be my words that come out this morning, but Christ's. And I feel very blessed to have this opportunity. We will be looking at two verses particularly this morning, their meanings and their applications. In doing this, we're going to have an introduction where we discuss the context of the verses. We're then going to break into an application in 3 points, which, ever the slave to alliteration, I've named paradox, pride, and peace. And if anyone is still listening by the end, we'll wrap it into a conclusion. So the first verse this morning is a well-known one. It's Matthew 11:28 to 30. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. To many rushed and busy people, this verse makes for refreshing reading. But like all verses in the Bible, we need to look at the context. Here in Matthew 11:28 to 30, Jesus confirms that he is the living God, and he will provide rest for those who are weary and burdensome. He is saying that he, and only he, can provide what the people of Israel, and now us, the wider church, so long for: rest. A yoke was a wooden crosspiece fastened over the neck of two animals, usually oxen, so they can pull a plow. And when Jesus came to earth, the Jewish people were yoked to the Mosaic laws, which provided a compass for which they used to navigate life and would in turn give them rest. The problem, however, was their disobedience to these laws and religious leaders like the Pharisees adding their own additional laws on top of the God-given commandments, resulting in a heavy load, a heavy yoke which Jesus is now compelling them to put down and instead join him, where his yoke is gentle. He's showing us the heavy burden we are carrying and invites us to take rest in him, something that only he can provide. Jesus, as he said, came not to abolish the law but to fulfill it, which means that the set aside one day off in 7 is no longer a commandment. It puts us in a tricky place where we find the best time to take a day off for restoration. Which brings us to the second verse this morning, which is Romans 14, verse 5. Paul says, if one person esteems one day as better than another, while another esteems all days alike, each should be fully convinced in his own mind. Here, Paul is instructing the church in Rome not to judge one another if one person treats certain days as holy, the weekly day off, for example, versus one who does not. Earlier in Romans, Paul encourages them to be convinced about God's grace liberating them from the Mosaic laws. Jesus knew the real source of rest in him and offers it to us. And Paul says through God's grace, we don't need to be confused by the law, but each be convinced in our own minds to observe these days or not. Whilst overall this is great news, we are free from the constraints of the 611 Mosaic commandments, but it also puts us in a difficult position when navigating life and finding rest. And in rest, we're talking about the recuperative worldly kind and not the eternal heavenly rest. We will aim over the next 3 points to discuss the value of rest, the dangers of rest, and the requirement for rest in our 3 points: paradox, pride, and peace. Which leads us to our first point, paradox. The region beta paradox is a phenomenon that people can be better in the medium to long term if their short term and current situation was actually worse. For example, it would be, paradoxically, better in terms of knee pain, and I tread carefully with this analogy with what feels like half the room than medical doctors, but it would be better for your knee to be fractured, experience all the stress and pain that is involved with that situation, then focus entirely on recovering, rehab and physio, and be back up, fully moving, pain-free within 8 to 12 weeks. Compared to another knee pain, a pain that hurts but it's more of a niggle and isn't severe enough to instigate an appointment to the doctor, and it's not overwhelming enough so you don't do any research into physio exercises or medical remedies, but as a consequence of this, you end up having this niggling pain for a whole year. You would, paradoxically, be better off fracturing your kneecap, with focus and intent, recovering and rehabbing from the injury, to be pain and injury-free within 12 months, than if you had a smaller niggle that you did nothing about and then still had this same knee pain some 12 months later. Another example, if you decided to cycle any distance that's 2 or more miles away, but decided to walk to any destination that was 1 or less mile away, you would paradoxically travel 2 miles quicker than you would travel 1. Or, if you neglect rest due to disorganization, or thinking your work-life output will drop if you have your time off, you may end up straying into the realms of the region beta paradox. Not only does rest replenish the soul, the body, and the mind, but it allows time and space for the Lord to become more present in your life as you strip away all other things. In having a rest, you're taking your foot off your own gas pedal. You're stopping what you want or need to do to give space to Jesus and what he wants or needs you to do. That is all well and good, Joe, I hear you say. I understand rest is important, but I just don't have the time. I realize many in this room are farmers, and I don't need a PhD in bovine biology to know that cows don't take a day off. 7 days a week they need milked, attended, or fed. The constant input of hay and the continual output of manure doesn't stop, and it doesn't pause to consider what Jesus is saying or wanting to do in their lives. Or you could be a business owner concerned about profit margins, increasing costs, supply chain difficulties, a rising corporation tax, all with several employees whose livelihoods depend on you. Rest? Rest, you say? That must be nice. I don't have time to rest. I've just got so many important things to do. But as it says in Luke chapter 12, he who is given much, much is expected. Furthermore, let me point you to the first two verses of Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go too late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives his beloved sleep. We spoke about Psalm 23 a few weeks ago. Well, verse 2 says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. Let's not get to a point where we are made to lie down. Let's adhere to the word and the counsel of God, and not enter the region beta paradox, where things are worse in the long term through neglect, when we can be more intentional in our matters today. Which brings me to our second point this morning, which is pride. Working is good for us. To many, it gives daily purpose. It generates income to live on. It means we can pay the bills, we can tithe, be charitable, and to be generous. In fact, working is biblical. It forces us to take responsibility. There are countless references in the 66 books of the Bible about why you should work and why it is good, especially working hard. Even at the men's meeting last week, we discussed what being a sluggard means in work and how we can best avoid it. A byproduct of doing something well and doing something to the best of your ability is pride. Pride of doing a job well done. But with that newfound pride comes a challenge in itself, being proud. And there comes the slippery slope. Thomas Aquinas likened pride as the gateway sin to all other sins. And whilst there are many examples of being proud, and there are many examples of being proud in the Bible, from Eve to Pharaoh to the Pharisees and to modern day life, we're going to be looking at pride through the lens of work and rest. We're all familiar with the parable of the talents in the gospel, where a master entrusts his property in the hands of his servants when he's away on a trip, expecting each servant to have made a return on the money in which he is given for when he gets back. As the parable goes, the one who was given 5 talents made 5 talents more, the one who was given 3 talents made 3 talents more, and the servant who was given 1 talent did nothing with it and faced an angry master when he came home. Now, in every group of people, especially this congregation, there will be different talent number of people. We're going to use this parable as an analogy for work. There are the 5 talent people, the high performers, blessed with an immense work ethic, dedication, and efficiency that equates to great personal success. These people can take on immense workloads. They can labor long hours and maintain a good input of time and productivity. Then there are the 3 talent people, with whom are very talented, dedicated, put all their effort into their job because that's the right thing, but enjoy doing things outside of work, so their work hours are limited. They're not striving to be the position of CEO. They want to complete their work to the best of their ability, but clock off at 5 p.m. on a Friday to enjoy their week. Lastly, there is the 1 talent person, the person who requires extra grace on a daily basis for not completing a job, not following instructions, leaving the place untidy after work in there, questionable in their dedication, and certainly lacking in their output. Now I sense a couple of backs stiffened, perhaps a few furrowed brows at this 23-year-old bloke who works part-time talking about talent and work ethic. But stick with me. What we're trying to say is that there are 1, 3, and 5 talent people. And all of us here this morning fall into those categories. We're not just talking about work in the commercial sense. We have amongst us retirees and stay-at-home parents. We're talking about workload capacities. How much stuff can you get done on a daily basis? And arguably, stay-at-home parents come close to the top of that list. We all have people above us, and we all have people below us. And if you're a 3 or 5 talent person, you've been blessed with a high threshold of workload, a God-given ability to tolerate a large volume of work. All round, great news. The sticking point is when you start to look down on the people below you. When you can do more than they can during the same working day, that you can work harder and for longer than those below you. You start scoffing at the fact they need more days off than you do. Or you complete a job faster and better and to a higher standard than the same person who was doing the same job at the same time. Yes, they may not be able to carry the same load as you, but they're still carrying their maximum. Everyone is made different. Don't judge. Do not be proud. Do not be superior in your working. Oh, you only start at 9 a.m. Oh, you're tired, are you? But you've had 2 days off this week. Oh, a week-long holiday, that must be nice. If words like these fall into your mouth or in the thoughts in your head, then you are beginning to be proud. Everyone is made different. Everyone is made in the image of God. That being said, we must also be wary of straying into laziness. Oh, I'm only a 1 talent person, I can't do any more work. But the book of Proverbs has multiple warnings. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will become you like a robber, and want like an armed man. After all, it was the servant who did nothing with his talent that was admonished by the master with fury. All was taken from him and given to the productive, and he was cast out. Whilst this quote may come across first as crass, the more you think about it, the more it rings true, especially in the Christian context of using God-given talents. The quote is, true hell is when the person you are meets the person you could have been. We all have talent. We can all bring something. Let's not slip into pride about those who work less than us, and let's not slip into laziness where we do less because God has given us what he has given us. Let each and every one give our all, so we are not the servant who is cast out by the master. So we've discussed the need for good, interrupted rest at point 1. Point 2, we've discussed how different people have different needs for the amount of rest they take, and how we shouldn't be prideful if our workload is higher, which leads us on to point 3, which is titled Peace. I'm going to start by asking you a question. When was the last time you were bored? And by bored, I mean kid on the summer holiday board. Nothing to do, no distractions, no jobs to do, no list to complete. When was the last time you were completely and utterly bored? If the answer to that question is right now during the sermon, I can only apologize. But, in all seriousness, When was the last time you had absolutely nothing to do? No phones to scroll on, nor books or magazines to flick through, or carpets needing hoovered. In today's world, it's very hard to be bored. The world's best engineers and neuroscientists are working on how to keep you on your phone for the longest time possible. In direct competition to social media, the news outlets are catastrophizing stories to grab your attention, and it has potent results. Why drive to work in silence when you can listen to a world-leading expert on a podcast? Why wash the dishes in peace when you can listen to the latest productivity audiobook? Why enjoy your downtime when you can do a few more chores around the house? Who would want a quiet evening when you can watch the latest blockbuster on Netflix? This isn't to castigate all news, social media, podcasts, audiobooks, and Netflix. We all use at least one, and I myself use all of the above. But it does display that in today's day and age, we have no space or time for quiet. It's go, go, go all the time. All is filled with consumption and information, making it harder to hear the voice of God. Have you ever noticed that the second most common answer you ask when you ask someone how they are, after the usual good, is busy? How are you? Good, comes the usual reply. Busy. Busy but good. What are we doing all of the time? King Solomon, the man who had it all, literally everything, decisively concluded that all the stuff we busy ourselves with, that it was all vanity and chasing after the wind. Have you ever had a conversation with someone whilst they're on their phone, and you know that they're not giving you their full attention, even though what you have to say is very interesting and very important? It's infuriating, isn't it? But that is what we are doing to God. We are only giving him half of our attention as we busy ourselves with the things of life, sometimes with phones and many other things which we deem important and we deem to keep us busy. In Psalm 119, verse 23, it says, "Even though princes sit plotting against me, your servant will meditate on your statuses." David had a lot on, and he had more responsibility than many of us in this room. And yet, even though when he was in the wilderness and others were actively trying to kill him, he prioritized the word and counsel of God. Our dear friend Tim Saxton once spoke how often prayer is like going to the doctor, walking into the appointment room, sitting down, listing all the things wrong with us and all the things we'd like the doctor to do, and then standing up, walking away without giving the doctor a chance to speak. With our head in our phones, our eyes fixated on social media and Netflix, our ears filled with podcasts and audiobooks, and any spare time frantically ticking off jobs around the house, we're now those patients going to the doctor. We're listing what's wrong with us, but not giving the doctor a chance to speak. The Jewish Shabbat, in which we get the English Sabbath, means to stop working, to put down our tools and to focus on God. Take attention from our own lives and focus on the Almighty. We need to give ourselves rest, to give ourselves quiet, so we can hear that still, small voice of God. And so, in conclusion, we need to give ourselves that restorative rest. Failure to do so will result in long-term issues. I'll leave it up to you on your own time to research what insufficient sleep and rest does to your long-term health. As the phrase, "a stitch in time saves nine," I butchered that, I'm going to try that again. As the phrase, "a stitch in time saves nine" goes, we must take action before we stray into the region beta paradox of long-term struggling through. We've also covered pride and its downfalls, how everyone has a different work capacity and rest requirement, how grace must be applied when dealing with others, and gratitude must be expressed when acknowledging that you have been blessed with a high work capacity. The flip side of that, however, is the dangers of laziness, of not fulfilling your God-given potential, and how it was he who did nothing with their talent faced the wrath of the master. Point 2 was all about how everyone had different capabilities and everyone requires a different amount of rest. And in point 3, we explored the dangers of consumption and information in today's age, and how it makes it even more difficult to be still, to be quiet, because that's when we hear the voice of God. Because when we hear that still small voice, we grow. And when we grow, we become more like Christ. And it was Christ who said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls."